Everyone, welcome. This is Alok Patnia, Managing Partner at Tax Mantra Global. I've got Rahul with me. He's a partner at Tax Mantra Global. And today in this webinar, we will talk about Budget 2021, which has been announced by our Finance Minister yesterday. This budget is unique in the sense that it is in the backdrop of a pandemic with massive health issues and global growth challenges. The interesting part about this budget is that growth and long-term infrastructure creation has taken a precedence over short-term arrangement which a government might have done. So the second part is in terms of not many changes in the direct indirect taxes. There are few interesting changes in terms of reducing the time limit from 6 years to 3 years for assessment, reopening of assessments. There is a change, which is a welcome change in terms of one-person company for NRI especially, so they can actually create a one-person company, wait for some time, see how it goes, and then maybe move to India fully. And there is an opening of insurance sector further, wherein the FDI has been increased to 74%. There is massive enhancement in the expenditure on healthcare, education, and there are a lot of intent which has been shown by the government. The government has also announced that they will privatize two national banks. They have also said that in this financial year they will try and get the LIC to IPO. So there is a clear intent that government wants to come out of business and they want to focus on governance and let business be done by people who can handle businesses properly. The stock market really gave a thumbs up to Nirmala Sitharaman in terms of yesterday and today, and there is huge rally. And I think that is because of a euphoria created by the budget in the sense that there is no taxes. Many people were thinking that there are a lot of things in the skeleton. They might bring in COVID tax, they might bring in COVID cess. Our governments are very popular and known for bringing in cess on different things and cess in different names. So I think there is nothing of that sort. But we will discuss the budget in detail and understand the fine lines. One more thing which is good in this budget is that the limit for tax audit has been enhanced from 5 CR to 10 CR for digital businesses. So any business which does 90% of its bank transactions through digital, through online, is the limit is 10 CR now. Also, there is no audit under GST. This was a long-term demand by many businesses that when you have monthly and quarterly returns, when you have matching, and when the system can throw up in terms of invoices which can be matched and which are not, why there is a need for a separate audit. So I think that has been gone away. So with this, I hand over to Rahul and help us to understand in detail in terms of what are the changes in the budget. Hi, Rahul.
Thanks Alok. Good evening, everyone. So, yeah, I think Alok summarized it very precisely that the focus of the budget has been towards healthcare, towards long-term infrastructure development, and overall the decisions taken are from a long-term perspective as it appears from this budget. To add to what Alok has mentioned, this budget has also earmarked close to 1.96 lakh crore rupees of funds towards PLI profit link incentive scheme of the government to boost the manufacturing sector. So that earlier there was only one sector under which the electronic manufacturing sector under which the profit link incentive scheme was available. Recently, the government expanded that limit to 13 sectors, and a significant amount of money has been kept aside and earmarked for distribution under the PLI scheme, which is again a major boost to the manufacturing sectors and small and medium enterprises who are working in the manufacturing sectors. So that's a step which the government has taken to boost the manufacturing sector. Moving forward, we'll see the details, the significant changes which have been in the budget. So every budget, the slab rates, the tax rates for individual companies are a major point of discussion. So this year there has been no changes in the tax slab rates, the cess rates, the surcharge rates. They all remain the same for all kind of SSCs. Only in case of senior citizens who are of 75 years or above of age and they earn only pension and interest income. In those cases, there are some changes wherein the tax will be deducted by the bank and then the senior citizen will not be required to file the return. Apart from that, we don't see much changes in the tax rates, tax slabs and individual taxes. So for NRI, government has announced that NRIs, they face a lot of difficulties in claiming treaty benefits and double taxation avoidance agreements. So for them to bring in more clarity, there will be rules notified. So, but as of now, the rules are not notified. The budget has announced that rules will be notified for simplification of NRI taxation and help them claim the double taxation avoidance agreement benefit seamlessly. So we'll await to see that kind of rules are being framed in this regard. Then there is so because of COVID, the travels have been hampered. So leave travel concession, which is allowed to employees in block period of 3 years. So for 18 to 21 block period, because of low travel, because of COVID, subject to certain conditions, people can claim allowances in lieu of leave travel concession of 36,000. So this is subject to the conditions being fulfilled, wherein the expenditure are being done towards GST registered vendors. This claim of 36,000 can be claimed because people have not been able to travel during COVID-19 situation. Apart from that, for individuals under the affordable housing scheme, there was a interest deduction which was available, and the sunset for that was 31st March 2021. So wherein additional deduction of 1.5 lakh was allowed to be claimed if someone has invested in the affordable housing scheme under section 80 EEA. That has been extended by 1 year till 31st March 22. Similarly, the exemptions under the affordable scheme for the builders have also been extended till 31st March 22. By 1 year, it has been extended. Another significant announcement is that the income tax returns, they would be now pre-filled with the details of capital gains on listed securities, dividend income, and interest from banks. So these details will also be pre-filled. So people with simple salary income with some interest or capital gain income from listed securities or dividend income from listed securities, they need not worry about getting their return prepared, but these details can be pre-filled and can be, the person can seamlessly file the tax returns even if they have these income. So now only the filling will be required by people who have business income, who have a profit and loss account or balance sheet to be reported, or other details to be reported like directorship in a company or foreign asset and liabilities. So things like that, wherein complications are involved, needs to be filled and reported separately. Otherwise, the basic details, the basic income will be pre-filled in the ITRs itself, and one can review and go ahead and do the filings. Another change which this budget has done is that they have capped the in case of provident funds, the upper limit of interest and principal investment has been capped at 2.5 lakh rupees, so that anyway 80C deduction was up to 1.5 lakh. So the intent here is that to keep the exemption limited to people who are investing lower amount and not not to people who are investing higher amount and parking their funds in these investment vehicles. So provident fund up to 2.5 lakh will be exempt and not above that. Another important change which has happened in this budget is to bring in clarity about employee contribution and employer contribution and their allowability. So the provident fund which the employer has in any company has two components: the employer contribution which the employer puts in, and the employee contribution is deducted from the salaries of the employees. So section 43B allows employer contribution even if it is deposited before the due date of filing of return. So month on month, even if the employer is not depositing employer contribution, but before the due date of filing of return, if he deposits the employer contribution along with interest, the employer contribution component is allowed as a deduction. However, there is an employee contribution component also, which the employer collects every month from or deducts every month from the employee's salary. And that employee contribution at times was confused with this 43B provision, wherein the employers, they used to pay the employee contribution late and still claim it, stating section 43B. However, that has not been the intent of the law, because employee contribution is something which the employer collects from the employee's salary, and it is something which is owned by the employee and is only deposited in the employee's PF account through the employer. So if there is any delay in that, the employee contribution is treated as income under section 224(10) of the Income Tax Act. So the law has now clarified that if there is any delay in deposit of employee contribution, it will be added to the income, and even if it is deposited before the return filing due date. So all the employers, they have to be very careful and very particular that this was already there in the place. This is not something, and this is not a new law which has come in, but it is a clarification. And the law has clarified that this has been the provision of the law always. So now the employers, they need to be more careful that they deposit the employee contribution before the due date at any cost. Otherwise, it will not be allowed. It will be added to the total income of the employer as the income. So if he delays in every month, the employee contribution of all the months will be added to the total income of the employer. So employer contribution he can pay before the due date of tax filing. However, employee contribution has to be paid before the due date under the PF Act. So PF Act, I think 15th of the subsequent month is the due date. So within that, it has to be paid. Otherwise, it will not be allowed as an expenditure and will rather be added to the total income. So in case of startups, section 80 IAC, which allowed 100% income tax deduction for first 3 years of the startup. So the eligible startups were those startups which were incorporated on or before 1st April 2021. So the government has extended that by 1 year, and startups which are registered on or before 1st April 22 will now be eligible to claim this exemption under section 80 IAC. Similarly, there is section 54 GB, wherein the sale proceeds of residential property could be invested in startups, and that was allowed as a capital gain exemption, long-term capital gain exemption. And the sunset for that was again 1st April 21, wherein the transfer had to happen before 1st April 21. The government has extended that due date also by 1 year. And now transactions till 31st March 22 can be covered under this exemption of section 54 GB. Another important change which has happened in the tax laws is that in case of charitable institutions, so charitable institutions, they were required to spend 85% of their receipts in any year to be tax-free for that year. However, these provisions were at times, because of the loopholes, were misutilized. So all the contribution which a charitable institution receives has two parts to it. One is the contribution towards corpus, which is exempt from tax, and another is normal contributions, which are exempt from tax only when 85% of it is expended during the year. However, because of certain loopholes in the law, even the expenditure which were made out of the corpus funds were at times were claimed as expenditure constituting the 85% of the expense. So corpus fund, which was anyway exempt, the expenditure from the corpus fund were used for claiming deduction, normal deduction of 85%. So now the law has been amended to bring in clarity that both these amounts cannot be mixed and has to be kept separate. So this is a step towards plugging the loophole in the taxation of charitable institutions. Then educational and medical institutions, they had certain exemptions under section 1023C. So it was earlier up to 1 crore of receipts they were exempt, but now that exemption has been increased to 5 crores. So here a benefit has been given to hospitals and universities and educational institutions, wherein for receipts up to 5 crore they can enjoy this exemption. Moving forward, there has been some amendments in transfer of capital asset or money or other asset to a partner or a member of a firm or a body of individuals. So usually in partnership firms, partners, they introduce certain capital, and then on year on year of operations, they earn certain profit, interest, etc., remuneration from the firm, which is distributed to them. So the portion on which the firm pays taxes, that is not taxable in the hands of the partner, and the ones which are claimed as deduction by the firm, the remuneration and interest, on that the partners, they pay the taxes. However, in partnerships, over a period of time, there is certain goodwill which gets generated. There are certain revaluation of asset which may happen. There may be certain properties in the hand of the firm which exceeds its value. And with this kind of increase in value, whenever there is a dissolution or a retirement in the partnership firm which happens, there were certain case laws, various judgments from different courts, which allowed no payment of taxes in the hands of the partner under such distribution or dissolution, even if the amount received by the partner was higher than what they were having in their capital account with the firm. So now there has been a clarity brought in by the income tax department that transfer of capital asset or money or other asset to a partner which exceeds the value of the partner which he holds in the partner's capital or current account will be now taxable under capital gains. Similarly, there were certain loopholes in the slump sale related provisions of the Income Tax Act, wherein because of certain judgments and because of certain precedences, certain assets were not considered as transfer in case of slump sale, and that was used to do tax planning and evade taxes. Now the slump sale related provision, section 50B of the Income Tax Act, has been amended to ensure that all the transfers which are liable for capital gain taxes under section 247 of the Income Tax Act, all these transfers, the provision of section 50B is in sync with the provision of section 247, and all the transfers there are covered under the definition of slump sales, and required taxes are paid to the tax department. Similarly, there is a clarity brought in under section 44 ADA, which relates to presumptive taxation in case of professionals, wherein professionals who earn a revenue of up to 50 lakh rupee in a year, they can claim 50% of their receipts as deemed expenses and 50% of the receipts as their profit and pay taxes on it, and they're not required to maintain books of accounts for that, and tax department will not question 50% deemed expenses in those cases. However, there is a clarity which has been brought in that this provision does not apply to a limited liability partnership. So if it is a professional firm which is an LLP, it cannot claim this benefit of Section 44 ADA, because LLPs are any which ways required to maintain books of accounts and report the necessary filings with the registrar of companies, and in certain cases are also required to get their books of accounts audited. So 44 ADA provision does not apply to LLPs. So there are many professional firms, legal firms, CA firms which have converted into LLPs. So these LLPs cannot claim presumptive taxation under Section 44 ADA, similar to private limited companies. So normal partnership firms, individuals and HUFs, they can, not HUF, individuals and partnership firms, they can claim 44 ADA presumptive taxation and pay taxes if they are a professional. Moving forward, there has been some amendment in income earned by way of royalty in case of aircraft operations on lease. So the NRI who is operating an aircraft and is into business of leasing of aircraft and receives royalty, they have been exempted from income tax over here under Section 10 4F, and subject to certain conditions, they have been allowed to claim exemption. However, one of the conditions is that the commencement of operation of business should happen on or before 31st day of March 2024. Also, there is an exemption on capital gain on transfer of such leasing rights, wherein one company is having the leasing rights and it transfer it to the other domestic company who is engaged in operation of aircraft. On such rights, the capital gain exemptions have also been introduced, subject to the new entity being starting their operations on or before 31st March 2024. So yeah, another important amendment happened for, so this would impact a lot of MSMEs, small and medium enterprises. So tax audit is required to be done in Section 44 AB of the Income Tax Act. Earlier, we had a limit of 1 crore rupees. So any business which exceed the turnover of 1 crore was required to get audited under Section 44 AB. However, last year, that limit was increased to 5 crores only for those businesses who had digital payments of 95%, receipts and payments of 95% through digital modes, through banking channels. For them, the limit was increased till 5 crores. So if you have a turnover of 2 crores and 95% of your revenue and expenses happen through banking channels or through digital mode, you are not required to get yourself audited under Section 44 AB. This was up to 5 crore rupees. Like even if your turnover exceeds 1 crore, but it's below 5 crore, you could have availed this. Now for this financial year 21-22 onwards, this has been increased to 10 crores. So any business who moves to the complete banking channel for their transactions and use digital modes of payments, both for receiving the payments and for making the payments, they can have a turnover of up to 10 crore rupees and still not get themselves audited under Section 44 AB. However, if you have cash receipts and cash income, cash expenses exceeding 5% of your total revenue or of your total expenses, the 1 crore limit still applies to you. Another important clarity which was brought in by the budget this year is depreciation on goodwill. So many businesses, firms, partnership firms, proprietorship firms, HUFs, they used to generate goodwill during their several years of business existence. And in case of sales or transfer or change in the constitution, those goodwill used to be capitalized. And again, this was a litigated matter where goodwill is depreciable asset, non-depreciable asset. There was a Supreme Court judgment which said that there could be depreciation on this. So that has been reversed now, wherein the law has clarified that depreciation, goodwill in the books will be a non-depreciable asset, and it cannot be depreciated, and expenses around that cannot be claimed. Various amendments in section 2, section 32, 1, section 50, 55 have been done to give effect to this amendment. So again, this is also an important amendment wherein so the builders and the real estate developers, they were required to sell their properties at a value which is not lower than the stamp duty valuation. If they sold anything below the stamp duty valuation, the stamp duty valuation was deemed to be the sale price, and they were required to do the compliances and pay taxes on that income. Last year, there was some amendment wherein up to 5% safe harbor was provided, wherein even if the price was lesser by 5%, it was deemed to be at a fair market value. Then it was done 10% for 1920 and 2021. And in this budget for 21-22, for transactions done between between 12th November 2020 and 30th June 2021, even if the variation is up to 20%, the real estate developer will not be required to pay any additional taxes, which means that they are now allowed to sell their properties at 80% value of the stamp duty valuation prevalent in that particular zone wherein they are making the sales. Similarly, section 56(2)(10) of the Income Tax Act, which relates to income from other sources, and wherein the buyer, he was also required to pay taxes if he bought any money at a value lower than the stamp duty value. So there also the amendment has been done to give effect to this. So now the real estate developers and builders, they will be allowed to sell properties at 80% value, and they'll not be required to pay any additional taxes for that. However, this is only for transactions which happen between 12/11/2020 and 30th June 2021. For other transactions, the earlier limit of 10% would be applicable for transactions beyond these dates. For NRIs, a major change was announced, but the rules, we are still awaiting the rules to come in, wherein the double taxation avoidance related changes have come in to make the thing seamless for the NRI. So that has not been discussed in the budget memorandum and finance bill. Separate rules will be notified. However, some changes have been done wherein so overseas retirement fund related taxes, there were certain anomalies. Those have been, certain hardships were there. Those have been removed for the NRIs. Some amendments have been done for and tax incentives have been brought in for the units which are located in international financial services centers, IFSCs. So mostly to support the fintechs which are situated at IFSC, certain tax exemptions have been brought in by the budget this year. The government is bringing in zero coupon infrastructure debt funds. So to give a boost to the infrastructure sector and bring in more investment there, zero coupon bond will be notified. So for this also, we are still awaiting the notifications and the nitty-gritties. Another announcement which came in was that we have this authority of advanced ruling, which passes rulings on request made by people mostly who who come to India from outside India to do business for a certain transaction, and they want clarity in the tax laws. For them, the authority of advance ruling has been there in place. So now the authority of advance ruling is being brought to an end, and instead there will be a board constituted, which will be called a board of advance ruling. And this board will be taking up all the advance ruling related matter and will be closing the things at highest priority, because there are, as of now, there are a lot of pending cases with the authority of advance ruling. To remove the pendency and fast track the things, the new board will be constituted to take up the things quickly. So the settlement commission has been there in place. The government, the tax department has also decided to bring an end to the settlement commission. And there will be a committee created to take up the pending cases with the settlement commission. And for smaller taxpayers who have filed their tax returns of up to 50 lakhs and for whom the dispute is up to 10 lakh rupee in a year, for them, the tax department is coming up with a completely online and faceless dispute resolution committee, DRC. So this has again been announced, but we have to wait for the notification and the exact shape of the DRC and the process of going to the DRC. But this will be given effect quickly. And all the cases apart from search and seizure cases, survey cases, and cases where the government has received certain information through attractions and through governmental agreements which the government has for information sharing. So apart from those cases, the smaller cases wherein a person has filed tax up to 50 lakh, filed return with a 50 lakh income, or the disputed amount is up to 10 lakh, they can be resolved at a DRC level through a online and a faceless mechanism. So this is again a step towards bringing down the litigation and ensuring speedy resolution of smaller disputes. Then, as Alok was mentioning initially, there has been significant changes in the way the income escaping and search assessments will be conducted from 1st April 2021 onwards. So earlier in search and seizure cases and also in income escaping cases, the department was allowed to open cases up to 6 previous years from the relevant assessment years. And in case of severe cases, it was allowed up to 10 years. But now the time limit for the assessments of old cases have been reduced from 6 years to 3 years. So now the cases during income escaping and search assessments can be opened up to 3 years prior to the assessment year in which the proceedings are happening. And the earlier years would get time barred. And they have also laid down fresh processes of opening cases, reopening cases for income escaping and for search assessments, wherein issuance of show cause notice and recording of specific reason for opening the cases. Apart from the cases, search cases, in normal reopening cases, the reasons have to be recorded. Opportunity has to be given to the SSC that why their cases are being opened. And all these will also happen only after prior approval from senior tax officials. So tax officials at the level of principal commissioner and chief commissioners and director generals would be allowed to give approvals, and only after those approvals the reopening cases will happen, and that too limited to up to 3 previous assessment years. Or also the reopening cases which will happen will happen based on the data which the department gets based on Just a second, I'll reshare it. Sorry. So the reopening will happen only based on the data which the tax department gets through computer generated data, which the department would get through various systems which they will automated system which they will put in place, and not all the cases will be available for reopening. So the internal guidelines and the internal processes for selection of reopening of cases based on computer generated data shall be laid down, and then only those cases will be opened. Are conducted again based on the guidelines which the department has issued internally, and only after approval from highest level in the tax department those cases will be reopened. So this is a very welcome move, wherein the harassments which used to happen under these provisions will reduce, and the businesses will be able to take ahead with their business more freely. Similarly, changes have been done in section 142(1), which is a section for calling for information and issuing notices for filing of tax returns and for providing information during assessments, reopening, and scrutiny cases. So, because the department has now moved completely to the national e-assessment centers, wherein jurisdiction-based inquiries are not happening. So to facilitate issuance of notice from e-assessment centers and to enable faceless assessments, section 142(1) has been amended. Another important announcement which happened was faceless IT-80, Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, has been announced. So recently, last year, the department moved to 100% faceless assessments, wherein all the income tax scrutiny assessment will happen anonymously and through a faceless mechanism through the National E-Assessment Center. Similarly, the first stage of appeal, the Commissioner of Income Tax related appeal, has also been made faceless and automated through the National E-Assessment Center. Now the government has proposed that they'll be working towards making the second appellate body, the Income Tax Appellate Tribunal, completely digital, online, and faceless. Next, the time limit for completing assessments have also been reduced, because the assessments are now happening online and through a faceless mechanism. All the tax filings and compliances are online, and there is a large-scale reconciliation happening, wherein 26 years of each and every individual and business is being reconciled through various data sharing mechanism which the government has in place now. The SFTs, the GST related turnover, so all those are getting automated, and automated reconciliation is happening. So in the given scenario, the time required for completion of assessment is being reduced year on year by the government. So earlier, from the end of the assessment year, the assessments used to take 21 months to get completed. Then it was reduced to 12 months, and now they have reduced it even further, wherein from the end of the assessment year, the assessments have to be completed within 9 months. So for assessment year 21-22, the assessments will have to be completed by December 22. There is a change in the definition of the term liable to tax. So this term is used widely in international taxation. Last year also there was an amendment wherein the person who were not liable to pay taxes anywhere were deemed to be the tax residents of India, mostly the Indian citizens and persons of Indian origin who were not liable to tax anywhere were deemed to be tax resident and pay their taxes and file their taxes in India. However, but this term of liable to tax was not defined earlier. So now this term has been defined, and liable to tax in relation to a person means that there is a liability of tax on that person under the law of any country, and will include a case where subsequent of imposition of such tax liability an exemption has been provided. So any person who under the law of a particular country is required to pay taxes will be considered as a person who is liable to pay tax in that country. And even if there is an exemption, further exemption which comes in, that will also be included in the definition of liable for tax. So if there is a if an Indian passport holder is a resident of a country wherein he is liable to pay tax, is required to pay tax, is a tax resident over there, but because of certain provisions there are exemptions provided, still he will be liable to pay tax in that country, and the provisions in India would not apply to him. So this term is being is used at several places in the Act, but it was not defined. Now it has been defined. Some rationalization in the MAT provisions have been done, wherein when a secondary adjustment happens or after certain rulings or certain changes, if there is amendment in the net profit of a company, then this provision allows the assessing officer to recompute the book profit under the minimum alternate tax provisions and readjust the MAT credit which has to be carried forward. So there were certain hardships being faced in carry forward of MAT and taking forward the credit of the MAT in cases where certain readjustments happened in the books of accounts and in the net profit. So that has been rationalized now. Similar to upper limit cap of 2,50,000 in PF related exemption, even in a unit linked insurance policy, ULIPs, there has been a cap of 2,50,000 rupees, wherein if the premium exceeds that amount, the exemption under 10D of ULIPs will not be allowed. So high premium units will have to be avoided if someone wants to claim exemptions under these provisions. Then there has been a new section 27AA-D which has been introduced for attachment of property in case there are cases of fake invoices. In those cases, the property of the person who has been involved in such cases can be attached now. So fake invoices have been unearthed in many income tax related cases and even GST related cases. So stringent laws have been brought in both under the GST laws over a period of time and now in the Income Tax Act also to ensure that in any such cases, stringent actions are taken against the fraudsters. The government is working towards conversion of urban cooperative banks into banking companies. So certain amendments have been done so that the transfer of assets are not taxable under capital gain taxes, and also carry forward of losses will be allowed from the old company to the new company. So certain changes have been made in the laws related to conversion of cooperative banks into banking companies. Certain changes have been done in the TDS provisions related to payments being made to FIIs and special purpose vehicles, insurance companies on dividend income which they earn. And TDS have been brought in for purchase of goods. So purchasers who have more than 10 crore of turnover, if they are buying any goods, then they are required to deduct 0.1% TDS on purchase of goods and deposit it with the government and do the necessary filings related to those purchases. So now purchase of goods for people having 10 crore or TDS provision, the rates have been kept at a lower 0.1%. Compliances for companies having 10 crore or more revenue, that comes into picture. And so this is again an important change. So various TDS provisions have been amended. So in those cases, if the person whose TDS is being deducted, if the person is a non-filer of income tax for last 2 years, then the TDS will be deducted at a higher rate. Earlier, Section 206AA was introduced, wherein for the people who are not having PAN, higher TDS rate of 20% was prescribed. So that ensured that people, they were required to obtain PAN, and TDS deduction happened against that PAN, because with PAN, normal TDS rate applies, and without PAN, higher rate of 20% was applicable. Now, similar provision 206AB has been brought in, wherein if a person has not filed his tax returns for 2 consequent years, then also the TDS rates would be higher for such person. So the rate would either be twice the rate specified. So for a professionals, if it is 10% rate or 7.5% rate, and if the person has not filed the tax returns for 2 years, then it will be a 15% rate for them. So twice the rate of the rate which is specified or the rate which is in force, or at a higher rate of 5%. So the earlier provision, for example, purchase of goods, we saw that rate is 0.1%. Various TDS provisions have 1% or 2% of TDS rates. However, if the person on whom deduction is being done is a non-filer of tax return, the rate increases to 5% or double of the existing rate. This has been brought into place, but yeah, this increases the compliance requirement a lot, because as of now, before making any payment, PAN is what is required, and based on that, the TDS is being deducted. Now we'll also have to verify, the deductor will have to verify if the deductee, they have filed their tax returns for last 2 years or not, and also take the copies for compliances at their end. So this seems to be a cumbersome process to implement on the ground. The government has announced disinvestment in tune of 1.7 lakh crores. I think Alok already mentioned public sector banks, LICs, IPO would be coming in, and some strategic and non-strategic sales will be done to fund the revenue of the government. Then under the GST laws, certain amendments have been done, wherein services from clubs and mutual organizations, wherein there is mutuality involved, the provision related to that has been clarified to ensure that it was always there in the law. And the services wherein there is a mutual concept involved, clubs and services to members, wherever it's provided, it has been clarified that they are covered under GST, and there is no GST exemption from those cases. Then the government has announced that annual returns and GST audit may not be required based on self-declaration made by the entities and organizations. However, from when it will be applicable, what is the format of self-declaration form, these things still require more clarity, and we'll have to wait for a certain time to get more clarity on this. Certain amendments have been made in the Customs Act also, wherein the exemptions which are there in place are, they will be phased out by 31st March 2023 until and unless fresh exemption notification are given for them. And certain amendments have been made to plug certain loopholes in the custom laws also, wherein the utilization of input tax credit and claim of refund related laws have been amended to make the provisions more foolproof. Apart from this, as Alok was mentioning earlier, there are certain changes in the OPC laws, wherein even non-residents, they are allowed to open a one-person company in India. So earlier, if a foreigner was required, wanted to set up an entity in India, the only option was a private limited company. And even in private limited company, there was a requirement of one resident director being on the board of the company. So now, if there is a one-person company allowed for non-residents, then non-residents can also incorporate a company in India without having another director. And also for non-resident Indians, the for for opening a one-person company, the residency requirement has also been brought into 120 days instead of the earlier 182 days requirement. So these should help the non-residents to bring in more money funds into India and start their business over here. So more FDI is expected through the OPC route now. Apart from that, they have also brought in provisions for decriminalization of the LLP-related provisions. So over last couple of years, the government has brought in various notifications wherein under the Companies Act, various provisions were amended to bring down the penalty-related provisions and criminal complications around that. Similar activity is being done for the LLPs now, and certain changes are done. One more important change is the change in the definition of small company. So under the Companies Act, small companies they get certain exemptions from applicability of various provisions of the Companies Act. As of now, companies having share capital up to 50 lakhs and turnover of up to 2 crore were considered as small companies. But now the turnover limit has been increased to 20 crore, and even the share capital limit has been increased. So the definition of small company has been made wide to include more companies, and so that the benefit of lower compliances can be utilized by a larger base of companies. So think, yeah, these are some of the important changes which have come up in this budget. So would like to know more views. If Alok would want to share any other views, and will be open for any further questions which our viewers may be having.
I think Rahul, thanks for a detailed explanation. So what we feel is that this is just a summary of the budget, and as and when we read the fine lines, because the budget has been announced only yesterday, we will be able to know more in terms of what is there in the fine lines, fine prints of the budget. So that's one part. We also plan to do secretarial, and we also plan to do secretarial and company law related webinar, because there are a lot of changes in company law in respect to one-person company, respect to small companies, in respect to LLPs. So we want to do that, and we will also do more webinars on head-wise and sector-wise. So I think that we will do. Overall, Rahul, what I feel is that this budget is way forward to the larger aspiration of New India, wherein more focus is on infrastructure, more focus is on generating demand by way of infrastructure and by way of getting more capital expenditure. I also feel that the government has done well, because no news is also good news. So no tax is also a good news. So if there is no additional taxes, because it would have been a very, I would say, knee-jerk reaction by the government if they could have brought in some tax on COVID or something to cover up their finances. But the government is very bold. They have shown the intent. They know that the fiscal deficit has a slippage to 9.68% at this point of time, and that's very much understandable because of the global pandemic and the global economy going down at this point of time. So they are ready to borrow more. They are ready to borrow more and spend in capital and in capex, and generate more capacity and generate more place for larger growth in the years to come. And some of the good changes which have been brought in terms of reducing the timeline for reopening the cases from 6 years to 3 years, or in terms of creating e-assessments at a tribunal level also. But however, I have a very different view in terms of e-assessments. The government has very recently started with e-assessments at that's called faceless assessments also at scrutiny level and also at the CITA level. I think the government should have let the system stabilize for a couple of years, see what's good, what's bad, see the pro and cons, and then maybe move that to the tribunal level. But the government wants to do it quickly, and government wants to bring in this to the tribunal level also. So we'll wait and see, because we still don't have much of experience in terms of what is good and bad for faceless assessments, which is going on at the scrutiny and the CITP level. But overall, removing the audit requirement under GST, extending the audit limit to 10 crore rupees under the income tax, those are welcome changes. As of now, more than 170 compliances are required to be done by SME in India. And if they can also merge labor law compliances, there are more than three labor law compliances, 3 to 5 labor law compliances if you want to go in detail. And if they can do something to merge those also, and I think the process is already there. They are creating a code, labor law code is being created, and let's see what they can do. But in terms of, but we need to see how we can reduce the compliances, and also more profit linked incentives needs to be given to manufacturing sectors. So I think thanks everyone for joining in today, and we will be open for Q&A, and we will in the weeks to come, days to come, as and when we read more and understand more and decode this budget more, we will come back to you with more webinars. We already have a webinar which is planned on changes in the corporate law, because now the railway budget and the changes in the corporate law is being merged with this also. So we have to do that and keep you updated as a promise. So that's it from our side. That's it from Tax Mantra Global. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks, Rahul, for taking out time and spending and throwing light on these matters. And we will come back soon on more webinars as and when we plan. So thanks everyone for joining in today, and stay healthy. Thanks, Rahul.
Thanks, Alok. Thank you everyone for joining in.